I would like to say that it is my great pleasure today to introduce Elena Pierazzo, who is a professor of Italian Studies and Digital Humanities at the University of Grenoble. She's a specialist in Italian texts, but has also created other editions. Her new book is coming out. Digital scholarly editing will be out hopefully in August. We are looking forward to this. And she's also, as you know, the chair and chief executive officer of the TEI, the Textual Encoding Initiative. So it's the person to tell us all about text encoding, I'm sure. So Elena, are you quite ready?
Almost.
Not yet. Okay, almost there. Yeah, it's working. Good.
It's working, wonderful.
Yes. Your mic.
Yeah. Just need to get from the beginning. Some weird things happening here. Okay. Hello. Here. Weird. I can't understand why it's not going to slide number 1 for some reason. Is that for slide number 2? But apparently that is what you're supposed to have at this point. View, presenter view. Yeah. Is it?
Yeah, that's working there.
It's working here, but not there. So doesn't help, does it? Is it? It's working there? Yes. Oh, well, then if you don't see it here, you look at your own screen. Hello, nice to meet you. And it's a pleasure for me to be here. And I'll try to speak slowly, I'm told. So, and at the end, if you want to make question, I get question in Italian as well, don't you worry. So, the topic of this, my talk is talking about the 2 editions. One is the one of Jane Austen, which I worked in 2010, we published it, and an edition which is a bit more recent, has been published yesterday. So it is quite recent. It's the edition of an Italian play of the Renaissance, Lo Stufaiolo. I'll start with some methodological issues from the beginning, which is the problem with critical editions the traditional way. There are many of them, but the problem I wanted to stress today is the fact that they present a text, okay, when you look at the page, which is unproblematic. It's clean, resolved. All the conflicts, all the problems have been solved by the editor. For text of period of orthographic instability, this gives the idea that we know the language of the author, and language of the author is that one. It also, for draft manuscripts, it gives the idea that authors produce printed pages out of thin air. That's what I said. What I mean is that in Italian we use the expression parlare come un libro stampato, mean that the author writes, they are already formatted and all done, all clear, all well. The traditional editorial practices, the one for printed edition, for this kind of material is to adopt some editorial principles for which you substitute the orthography of the text with modern orthography. So you normalize word separation, capitalization, Latinization, also everything is done with the normal spelling. And also the punctuation, the paragraph-ematic system is done with the modern use, otherwise we can't read it. There is also a total lack. That is the problem, because everything is done by the editor, and you have the note al testo, the note to the text. It would say orthography has been normalized according to the modern system, and all these things have been done for you. So you don't know really how many times an editor has actually changed the real word, the words that are on the text. it gives, in my opinion, that was the things that drove me to the digital humanities many, many years ago, is that there is a false perception of what editorial work is about. Otherwise, digital editions, digital editing, allow for a more flexible approach. They allow to encode things in different ways, as we'll see. And so they hold more potential for linguistic studies and genetic studies when you do think about stratification, layers of things. It also gives the possibility as a side product if you want to produce a printable version of the text. This is given by what I have defined paradigmatic editions. What is a paradigmatic edition? You think about the paradigmatic axe with respect to the syntagmatic axe, is the axe of variation. So as you have it in the variation on the manuscript, the author making correction on the paradigmatic axe, you can have it also in editing. So you can edit paradigmatically. For each word, you can preserve all the variation and add variation of your own, the orthographic new versions, if you want. These allow then to have multiple outputs from the same basis. So in this conception of the text, variations and difficulties are not a bug of the manuscript, they are features, they are value. So this type of edition, the paradigmatic edition and scholarship, allows to change the way we consider what is digital editing and our scholarship. So as I said, we presented 2 case studies. I will start from the Jane Austen fiction manuscript, and which you probably know. Should be here. Can you see it? Yes? Good. I'm making it a bit smaller so you can see how it looks like. This is the way it looks like. You have on the one side, you have the manuscript, and on the other side, you do have the transcription. And this is a ultra-diplomatic transcriptions, if you want, meaning that everything, we have tried as much as we could to reproduce the complications of the manuscript and the layout of the page and to the last bits that we could reach. It's a very simple website in the end because there is no many features. It's just, the manuscript and the transcription. You can work it down. The corpus we consider is, for Jane Austen, is only, the manuscript represents only the unpublished manuscript, text. Because when she wrote something, she sent it to the publisher and destroyed all the drafts. Well, the only exception to that is 2 chapters of Persuasion, because it is the alternative ending. So she decided to change the ending, so the one she sent to the publisher is not the one we have. So it's a different ending. And from a time perspective, they range from when she was 9, so very, very young, until she died. So they range all her life, the span of her life. From a content point of view, we do have fair copies and draft, both. And we do have loose leaf and stationery, notebooks, bought at Meiji, or booklets that she did herself. The editorial tradition of those material is particularly interesting. So this was discovered and published for the first time gradually by Chapman, which is the great editor of Jane Austen, as clean reading texts. And all the corrections, which are, you've seen, there are them, they were in endnotes, so at the end of the book, not to disturb the reader. And that has been all editions until 2010. And so far, there is a new edition, the print edition is coming out next year, but they are all like that. There isn't any other type of edition of this material. So the digital edition we did wanted to break the tradition of this kind of perception of this material. So we decided to preserve her spellings and her weird paragraphematic system. So the fact that, for instance, she didn't punctuate properly her material. She used dashes instead of punctuation, hyphens, different length. And her capitalization is all over the place, changes, is inconsistent. She used different form for the same letters, and she did also mistakes. We shall see some of them. She apparently couldn't spell. And so we also kept all the different hierarchy of her interlinear insertions and deletions. We call this a conflictual edition. What does it mean? That the problem of the text are not resolved for the reader. They actually are valorized. They are highlighted. And this edition allows for the detailed study of the Austen writing, habits, and language. For instance, if you know a little bit of English, you will find that there are 3 quotations there in which she put the apostrophe in the wrong place. So the its is wrongly apostrophed, which is the main problem. It's an error that we mark with the red pen in all the students' essays today. So apparently she was doing the same error, which is considered the worst horrible errors in the English language. So this is the way, again, as said, you see the transcription, while tried on the one hand to imitate the manuscripts, it doesn't really. It is something different. It is kind of a map to navigate the manuscript, because even if you try to imitate it, you already create something different. If you think when you're going around in an unknown land, unknown country, you use Google Maps to navigate everywhere. So the representation of the reality you have in your phone, it's not the same of the reality around you, but you use this representation to navigate the reality. We thought of the transcription in the same way, as a tool to navigate the complexity of the manuscript. I'll give you a couple of examples. She used to spell friend inverting the E and the I, but it's inconsistent. So I have counted in the whole corpus, which is a small one, 120 occurrences of friend with the spelling inverted and 79 with the right one. So she was shifting different one. And the uses of dashes instead of full stop, commas, or whatever changes in her lifetime. In the volume the first, which is huge, and that's what she was writing when she was 9, she used 89 times a dash. But in Sanditon, which is the unfinished manuscript, the length of which is a third, if you wish, of volume the first, is 1,356. The other thing is that, for instance, Persuasion is 350, but it's just 2 chapters, so we can calculate it's more or less comparable. So she seems in her life to increase their shabbiness of punctuation, adding, not being accurate, because she was relying on the printers to take her shabby manuscript and transform in something readable. So what happened when we presented this edition to the world? The reactions actually from the readers were violent, and I mean it. So we had emails saying, you killed our Jane. Jane Austen is kind of an institution in the Anglo-speaking world. It is, the most read book, even more than the Bible. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Everybody reads Jane Austen, and they quote it by heart. And the fact that we presented the correction of Jane Austen was something that people were shocked. We had the Jane Austen Society writing, you killed our Jane, to the editor, and that was terrible. And then saying, you are lying, that's also what they told us. Jane Austen could spell, why you changed it? You falsified the evidence, in spite of the fact the manuscript was there to show that we didn't. They told we did. And some scholars say, well, this type of edition has limited impact because nobody cares about the manuscript. We want to read the text. And we had threats as well. So watch your back, we will come after you. So we had people threatening our life for destroying Jane Austen. So as I said, the reaction, when you show to people what they do not expect, in this case it was kind of a crime we committed against Jane Austen. Second example I want to talk about is the case of Anton Francesco Doni, which is totally different situation. You're talking about an Italian which has been called different ways in course of his, the critics called in Avventuriero della penna, adventures of the stylus. Polygraph, someone writes a lot, not very well, that is the assumption, and also use scapigliato, that is someone with uncombed hair, some kind of untidy and weird and wonderful, I would say. He was really a rock star at his age. His editions were flying from the shelf. He had to reprint constantly, build. He's the one invented the serials. So for the Zucca, there is the work I edited a few years ago. We have the second, third, fourth edition because it couldn't print enough for satisfy demands. So, but his literary fortune declined dramatically at the beginning of the 17th century. Change of taste, the counter-reform, all his work were put on the index of the forbidden books. So that was the reason he almost disappeared from reading. However, he remained one of the favorite authors for lexicographer. All his work have been used by the Accademia della Crusca in the creation of the dictionary. Quotation of the Doni is almost every lemma. It's amazing. They knew every single word. Not only that, the Stufaiolo, which I'm about to talk about, was owned by the founder of the Dizionario della Crusca, Leonardo Salviati. So he was the one of possessor. He was seeking actively manuscript, unpublished material to use it. However, in spite of this enormous linguistic interest for the work of Doni, no linguistic study exists today for him. When I did work at the edition of La Zucca, which I did in 2003, which is huge, 2 volumes, 1,000 pages and stuff, I did a lot of linguistic comment, 2,300 of them so far, but no linguistic commentary. I didn't do a proper analysis. Because I was wondering, yes, it is a printed book. Is that really his language, or is the one of the printer? I know he controlled the print, but how much did he? So I thought, what about if I look at the manuscripts, the autograph of Doni, to see what was actually his real language? In fact, between 57 and 67, for a decade, he stopped printing and just produced manuscripts, which are beautiful. But none of those, which now are almost all of them edited modernly, have been edited preserving the orthography and the language of Doni. Just to let you know, this is the type of manuscripts that he was working. You can see them. They are gorgeous. They are autographic. He was really good at the drawing. This is the manuscript I work with. So yeah, it's the dream of everybody, particularly people that work with the scrappy notebooks and all corrected. This one is fabulous, okay? It's really easy and fun. And, oh, it's gone for some reason. All of a sudden, oh no, it's gone, okay, well, too bad. I mentioned that this edition has just come out, and it is, I'll show you, it's been published within an online journal, which is called Scholarly Editing, okay, which is here. No. So the edition comes, you have a long introduction, a very boring one, with all the explanation. Then you do have the 2 manuscripts, because the exciting things, that's why I did the edition, is that I discovered a new manuscript. The edition, the Stufaiolo, was published at the end of the 19th century, based on a manuscript based at which is at the Riccardiana Library in Florence. I discovered a new manuscript that is at the Biblioteca Valentiniana of Camerino. And so for each of them have been edited in this way. So you do have the reading edition when you open it, but you can also go to see the diplomatic version of it, which is this way, if it's coming, and for which you can see the manuscript image. What I found very exciting is that this integrate Juxta. If you don't know what Juxta is, it's an online tool, well, it can be also desktop, that allow automatic collation. So you can see the text this way. So if you highlight one variant, you see on the other side how it is. So you see the variance between the two manuscripts. You would see that even if in a small play, I did find 3,000 variants. That convinced me that I couldn't do one edition. There are really two individual versions that you need to be able to compare and see the difference. And there are differences. The version of the Valentiniana, it is much closer to the version that was staged and played. The other one is a reading version of the same. So there is a lot of differences also on the type of text. And what I liked, what I found even more exciting, I did it, I'm excited by that, is that you do have for each version what I call a full account of the editorial normalizations. So I have made a list of all the corrections I did on the text, and only I'm telling how many of each category, which we'll see, but I listed all of them. And so, for instance, in the text, I have modified 27 times perché written separately into perché united, and poiché 13 times. So you can actually see word by word what I have done. And I have categorized the variations. So, for instance, you say that I have added an accent 206 times, and then the accents have been deleted 40 times. So you can see you have an account of the original orthography here. You can actually read it, but also study it quantitatively. Okay? What I found really something, I knew it, but I didn't expect it to be that many, is that for a text, which is 11,500 words, I have made 6,700 corrections. Okay, it's more than one every 2 words, which is a lot if you think about it. And everything would go in an edition, a printed edition, in normalize the orthography and the punctuation according to the modern use. So that's what I think the critical edition gives the traditional printed one a false perception of textuality and of the editorial work. Go back to the presentation. So this kind of edition allowed me, for instance, to answer some research question like which type of punctuation Doni used, semantic or syntactic? The answer is semantic. And actually, he was really attentive at the pronunciation, at the reading aloud, as we will see in a second. What is the meaning of a particular sign that is a punctus elevatus, which looks like a flat question mark? Or is it consistent in its spelling? The answer is no, it's not. So the same word can be spelled in 6 different ways, even in his manuscript, orthographic manuscripts. How Latinizes his language? Not very much, if you compare it to Machiavelli, for instance. So it's already far away from the beginning of the sense, a generation before and a generation after, things changes a lot. Here is a list of the typology that I've put for analyzing, normalizing the language. So, for instance, the use of the diacritic I, how consistent it is, word separation, the type of Latinism you find, the capitalization. The capitalization is particularly interesting for me. I have modified for 3 reasons. One, because we don't use it anymore. We use capital letters for common names. Sometimes because I changed the punctuation. Sometimes it was a lowercase and becomes uppercase because I put a full stop. Sometimes there was a full stop, I put a comma, so I have made it from capital to lower. And I have kept all of them separate. The paragraphematic system of the text includes a period, so it is 2 columns like a tilde, that thing, which is full stop when you go on a new line, so it is a sign that we don't use anymore in contemporary Italian, and the famous punctus elevatus, which in the manuscript V. Valentiniano occurs 171 times, of which I have converted in my reading edition 50 times as an exclamation mark, 102 times as a question mark, but 9 times as a full stop, 6 times as a comma, 2 times as a colon, and 1 time as a semicolon. So you see that it's a very different way, the way we do understand that sign. It is in between, normally speaking, between an exclamation mark and a question mark, but there is other things there that have not been studied. While analyzing text this way, you actually discover things that you normally don't notice if you do work in a different way. And what I did discover in this manuscript is that don't use a sign like an hyphen or an equal, not only when you come at the end of the line where the word is broken into bits, but also in between complete words. So for instance, in the first example you see there, you have la quale come udirete. In between come e udirete, which in Italian are 2 words, you have an hyphen. And follows that say, appresa la mia lingua tanto bene che la parnata, hyphen, goes a new line in Italia. So you do have these signs, which I've wondered for a while what they were. So none of the punctuation handbooks or there have been lots of interest on punctuation lately with the beautiful books by Vice Mortara Garavelli, published in 2008, but nobody speaks about it. So there isn't anything about it. And a paleographer suggested, Mark Smith, suggested to me that it could be actually a filler for, justify the line. But if you see the example, it doesn't really come to the line. And in the second example, that is a bit smaller underneath, you see that you have 2 characters, Vincenzo and Caterina, speaking. And the speech of Vincenzo, which is a soliloquy, he's speaking to himself, is broken by a speech of Caterina, which is the servant that is trying to open a door. So this door doesn't open, so there are 2 parallel things going on. And they use a equal after the word bene. Non ho un'ora di bene né riposo giorno e notte. So this is the same speech interrupted. So he uses an equal to mark that. So I do think it's something else. It's not a filler. I think we can compare this manuscript, knowing that this manuscript was normally thought for reading aloud, as a score for music. So I call it a score for reading voice, where it is important that the punctuation is helping the reader. So the hyphen would tell the reader, attention, try to get the first word at the following line and not to put a pause. And this is consistent with the punctuation of plays that were given to for the actors to stage. We do have this kind of situation, but also in music, in notation, music notation. And we know that Doni was actually a great musician, and he wrote lots of music. He published several scores, and one of the manuscripts, in fact, the Stufaiolo, in his dedication to the dedicatee, said, you will also find here the music of intermezzi, which we don't find, probably they were not binded together. But for other manuscripts, we do have the music. So in this case, we don't, but we know we did. So the music habit of adding small notes at the end of a line to anticipate the first note of the new line seems to have played this, because I've checked a few hundreds of manuscripts. Doni used this system all the time, and he's the only one I can find for this period that did. Nobody does. So I want to finish this presentation with 2 notes on methodological notes, a few lessons you can learn from these experiences, which is the impact of digital on editing. First of all, there is what I call a change in heuristics. We work differently. We do encoding, we do have digital facsimile, we do email our colleagues, we do have images sent us via attachment. We do work differently. We do automatic collation. We have things we didn't do before. For instance, we transcribe, some people, most people, transcribe their witnesses and collate automatically. That's juxta that we've seen. We have changes in the research question. We can ask different things to our manuscript. We look for different things and we find things we didn't know they were there because we couldn't look at them. There is also change in the editorial, in the perception of editorial work. We are more aware by encoding it of what we do. And we can count how many times we do things. And there is also change in the understanding and the perception from the side of the reader of what a text really is. That has taken us to a transformation of editors into encoders, if you want. What does it mean? Encoding text, Barbara mentioned the text encoding initiative, which is the formalism that allowed the editions you have seen, and most of the other editions you will see today, is an editorial act. So adding code to explain what the text is an editorial act. It is an interpretative endeavor that makes explicit the understanding of an editor about the text is editing. There are, of course, different types of editorial acts. Some are more scholarly than others, some are more interpretative than others, but it is nevertheless editorial. So the question that opens this change is that do we have all to become encoders? Does all editors have to transform themselves into encoders? I'll leave it open. However, even if we all transform ourselves into encoders, that wouldn't be enough, because we have to become programmers as well, in the sense that if you encode an XML, you cannot distribute XML only in the edition of Stufaiolo. You can download the XML freely, they're all there. However, there are not many people that will actually find lots of enjoyment by reading it. So you have to transform into HTML, PDF, EPUB, something to become readable, if you want. So who has to do it? Who has to do the programming? Is that the editor? Or can he rely on someone to do it for him, for her? What if the editor does not have funding to pay someone to do it? Or doesn't work within a center for research where there is someone that can do it? What if the editor is a PhD student on his own, and is desperate, want to learn a bit of TI, and then what? I like a lot the scholarly editing, the journal you have seen model. You send them XML, they produce beautiful edition for you. It's a scholarly journal that is fully TI aware, and they do take advantage of the encoding. And they work with you to the creation of these beautiful interfaces. They're very simple, but that's a way of doing it. It's a model we should consider very, very carefully. And that's something that raises lots of questions for what we should do as digital humanists, I mean. But the editor is also, as data manager. What does it mean? Not all data is equal. There are data that is good and data that is bad. A good data follows a standard that is shared, that is well documented. Bad data is the format that I invented in my garage, and that works only with the tools I create because nobody else can use it. But how an editor should know which is which? Who has to tell the editors which is the good data, which is the bad data? But then we have the editors that has to become also a cultural facilitator. So that has to calculate how many people will come on the website. Shall I tweet about it? Shall I Facebook? Shall I crowdsource? Do I need to think about impact? And that is another thing the editors didn't do normally. They were just giving to the publisher, and the publisher will do distribution and publicity and everything. Now we have to do it ourselves. So I conclude now about what is digitality in my point of view. Digital editions do offer exciting new opportunities for scholarship, and they do enable new research to be pursued. But they're not cheap and not easy. solution, and they are not yet ready for become everybody piece of cake. And in particular, what I think there is a great deal of theoretical questions and reflection we should have about what does it mean, digital editing, actually. Thank you.
We have time for some questions before we change speakers. So, any questions? No questions? Also in Italian.
I was about to say, anche in italiano.
No? I have a question.
Okay.
Can I ask it? Okay, I would like to know what type of variance is the juxta visualization showing? Is it any change?
Yes.
So all the spelling too?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have done the comparison. The comparison of juxta is done on the diplomatic transcription.
Yeah.
So even the punctuation. So everything is showing all the differences. Because when we're talking about autograph, we are interested in everything. All the handbooks about how to edit, when they talk about autographic material, you should be nail variator, so really to keep as much as you can. So in this case, I was interested in everything, and I wanted to see, for instance, is the author consistent in his punctuation in different versions? Is he consistent in his variants, in his spellings? The answer is not. It changes a lot, and it goes both ways. There is some direction of correction between V and R, but it's not consistent at any way. So, for instance, you do have, you see the word here, I'm highlighting olio, lowercase in one side and uppercase in the other. Why olio on one is lower than upper, I have no idea. They're just different. And vai a letto or vai a letto. That's it. So the variations are very interesting because they show that what he was interested in is variation at the micro level of the language. The content is very, very similar. I have compared his type of rewriting, because it's a rewriting things, as a variation on a theme, again, a musical metaphor. If you think the variation on a theme, that you have in Paganini or something, in which takes the same thing and vary it many times. For the Stufaiolo, we have 2 versions, but for the Ville, we have 4. And they're all rewritten in the same way. So it does change it a lot.
Very interesting. Well, there's another question.
Okay, I have a question. Thank you very much for your overview of all the problems and the basis of these 2 projects. You talked about the different roles of the editor, encoder, programmer, data manager, and the last one I think is particularly important because I see that many of these projects that we undertake.
The culture facilitator one?
Yeah, the culture facilitator. They're very sophisticated, but very often they're very poorly used by a larger community. So like people who teach literature, Italian, Portuguese, English, whatever, they're really not aware of all of this new editorial work that's being done with digital tools, and we seem to be unable to get our editions to these users, these types.
Yes. I did a presentation about the concept of if you build them, will they come? And the answer is no. They won't. We have the impression that since we put our things on the internet and it is free, while the critical edition are in books, in library, and are very, very expensive, that they will have thousands more people coming to our editions because they're free and they are on the internet than the number of very small number of readers of our critical editions. But this is not true. We have fooled ourselves for enough, saying that since we do put things on the internet, everybody will be interested in scholarship. And we discovered that people interested in textual scholarship are textual scholars. And that's it, basically. If we wanted to create editions for the large public to enjoy, we have to do a different type of editions.
Okay.
The example, for instance, I gave always is the apps created by a company, publisher, Touch Press. For instance, if you think of the Wasteland of T.S. Eliot was being created as an app for iPad. And they have sold 28,000 versions of this app. Normally an edition of critical edition sells 28,000. Yep. So that's the difference. And they have done it for the large public, and they succeeded. Yep. So if you think it for the large public, you should do it for the large public. If you want to do text or scholarship, you do it for scholars. And the fact is, on the internet doesn't change this reality, actually.
Sorry, I have to say something. It does a bit, because my edition of The Origin of a Species has more than 9,500 users a year. They are not scholars, and they are coming to see the variation there. So it depends. It depends on the text, and it depends how you present it. But you're right that nitty-gritty things are for textual scholars and not for most people.
So
just to quite some years ago, I think it was 2009 or 2010 when you launched The Origin of the Species website.
Yes.
I was at Loyola University in Chicago, at the library, and a student had the book of The Origin of the Species, and there was the laptop next to it with the Origin of the Species website, and it was working between the two of them. So that's not true that only textual scholars uses these resources.
Okay. So did you take a picture of that? I would have seen that.
It was in 2010. There was no smartphone, so it was some time ago. So
okay. Yeah. Good. We should move on, because otherwise